Peace, love, and life, family. It's your girl, Morgan Renee Myers, tuning in with y'all for another story time with more of my. Right now, I'm in the book No Disrespect by Sister Souljah, who is an incredible author, activist, just an amazing woman with a strong mindset. So far, I've already recorded and downloaded or uploaded onto my YouTube channel her note to readers in chapter 1. So I'm going to do a small recap and then I'm going to just hop into chapter 2. I like giving commentary while reading this book because it correlates with a lot of the themes that I like to talk about on my page. Talking about, sex, communication, and relationships, and how they all tie together in family, child rearing, and the type of adults that we turn into. So I want to find. I'm gonna read some of the post questions that I made today based off of themes that brother Elwood. I'm gonna read some of the statuses that I posted today based off of themes that I got out of chapter 1, which was mother, and she was talking about how she grew up in the projects. Well, actually, her mother came from an environment where she was taught to be taken care of by a man and provided for, and she married that, and then her father got epilepsy, and he couldn't no longer provide, and that affected his mental health and his ability to feel masculine. But he didn't want his wife to work, and he didn't want to accept the welfare, and the welfare started not to really help. And so Sister Soldier's mom ended up divorcing him and moved them to the projects. And so from there, she was able to see how like black people in a poor or low income situation, how they live. It was violence. She had what she calls what did she call them men? Rentals. So you would see different men come in and out of women's homes, but none of them was sticking around, yet they was continuing to create life. So I'm gonna just read some of the questions that I posted today for Family Friday. So I asked, what did men learn in their family growing up in regards to relationships with women? Most of them said like nothing. Like most of these dudes was like they ain't learned nothing. They learned what not to do. They learned all the wrong stuff from guys in their lives. That was pretty sad. Then I asked, is ejaculation control taught in families? Because someone commented about that on something else I asked. So I just asked that. We don't even teach men how to control their ejaculation or to retain their semen or anything like that. So that contributes to children being born. What else did I ask? If a woman is burnt out from having multiple children, do you advocate for birth control or abortions if a woman is at her wit's end if she can't afford to get her tubes tied? That had some interesting comments. My sister of Fast Crochet, she gave her experience on growing up in the hood, what she called the bricks, and how it actually made her a better person had it not been for that experience because it taught her to think fast and all of that. I also asked, can having too many kids leave a mother burnt out and neglectful of the latter children? If a man is the provider and falls physically and mentally ill but doesn't want the wife to work and welfare hits but so much, is divorcing and the wife relocating her children to public housing, aka the projects of the hood, sound judgment? I asked, what did you learn from your mother and her relationships with herself, men, and children? What was your relationship like growing up with your mother? If people grew up in the projects, what was that like? Does the age a woman has a child affect her ability to be a better parent? And it was one particular one where I asked about, did I read it already, about the woman having multiple baby daddies? Hold on. Oh, should single mothers with multiple kids and fathers be mandated to be on birth control until in a better economic position? Now some people made a good point that just because she's a single mother and has multiple baby daddies and stuff does not mean that she's not in an economic standing or she live in the hood. But for the most part, like, let's stop playing games. We know most women that are single mothers, they have multiple baby daddies. The majority of them live in the hood or in low income areas, or they're struggling to take care of the 5, 6 kids they have, but they keep having kids. So one sister commented, and she's a doula, so she helps women give birth. She said, not clear what having multiple kids by however many people has to do with bodily autonomy or reproductive freedom. These are new, concepts and words that we're using these days. And I get what she's saying. And my response to her was that all these questions that I was asking today on my page stem from the reading of this book. But that the author, she made some points about how the economic disparity along with multiple kids in the projects has led to a lot of influences and cycles in her community, such as kids seeing rentals, men coming in and out of their mothers' homes and leaving their mothers with kids and not being around to help raise them, the conditions of the neighborhood, not having grass and play sets, and violence, and convenience stores that, serve junk food and things like that. Children raising children because mom's at work all day, so the older child got to watch the younger children. And I told her I found it interesting that from that standpoint, if it's already an economic struggle with the kids and their fathers not being present, why would mothers continue to create life? So I think that's a question we need to address. And I know a lot of people, that's their immediate go-to. Well, we shouldn't worry about women's bodily autonomy and her freedom of her body. Okay, yeah, no, I think some of these laws that politicians makes against women's bodies are ridiculous, and does not ask for the approval of women. But I think we also have to do a due diligence and look at ourselves. If we already have 6 kids and we're struggling to feed them, house them, clothe them, and you already got 6 baby daddies and you just continue to keep creating life, I just don't think it's the wisest move. I think it's something to self-analyze, but people don't like to look at themselves, don't like to hear the truth about themselves because it hurts, but we need to, because what we don't need is, if you tuned in, you heard the type of conditions that she grew up in the hood. So it's like, if you are in that economic position, you're not in the best place to really, like, I'm not going to say raise them properly, but it's just so much that the kids have to come up against. It's not just about you having bodily autonomy at this point. It's like, okay, I already have 5 kids here that I'm barely able to feed, clothe, house. I'm sending them to school to get the white man's education. I'm not teaching them much of anything other than they seeing different men come in and out that don't stick around and help take care of them. So that's pretty much, it was a lot more that I got from that chapter, but that chapter really brought up a lot of great questions. So just scroll through my page today and see some of the questions I asked, because they were all influenced from some of the subjects she talked about in chapter 1, which was about her mother and her upbringing. And by the end of the chapter, her mother had started messing with white men for money. So chapter 2 is called Nathan. This is No Disrespect by Sister Souljah. And it's an autobiography, meaning she's talking about her life. She's telling her own story. Now, I guarantee you I'm probably not going to read all the chapter 2 because this thing a little lengthy. So let me go ahead and put my bookmark in somewhere now. I'm trying to see what page it's in on. Good God, girl. She be writing. Ooh, that's a long. What's that? 41 to 95? Yeah, no, we're going to stop by halfway through. All right, here we go. Tune in. And I'm going to upload this on my YouTube, so you can catch up if you need to. Nathan. I couldn't wait for college. I was excited and hyped to be going. For me, college would be a place far away from home, even if it was still in New Jersey. Few people would know me. I would be free to be anyone I wanted to, even someone I was not. Or I could become the person I had always been, but whom nobody had allowed me to be. College offered me the opportunity to select my own courses, my own professors, my own direction, and to rid myself of things I considered ridiculous. Even though I still had some constraints, I felt more like an adult, more in control. Actually, I had felt like an adult since I was a little girl, and while some people cherish their youth, I love the idea of being able to think and decide for myself. College would free me sexually as well for the first time. In high school, if you were considered intelligent, advanced, a high achiever, you could not also be considered sexy or sexual. You were dismissed as a rocket scientist or a genius or a complete nerd. I knew there was something wrong with this way of thinking because even though my own friends chose to ignore it, I had been blessed with a good amount of natural beauty. My mother said that my intelligence was what was scaring me, and so they never got to admire my beauty because my mouth, my thoughts, and my assertiveness assertiveness drove them away before they had the chance to get a good look or feel for who and what I was. I had decided quietly that if they were scared of me, they couldn't possibly be men. After all, weren't men supposed to be strong, and weren't men supposed to be stronger than women? So, in feeling good about my appearance, my body, I paid more attention to myself. I had exercised throughout the entire summer before college and used some of the money I had earned in scholarship awards to buy some new clothes. My first day in my new college dormitory room, I stood in front of my mirror admiring my long eyelashes, my big brown eyes, broad shoulders, full titties, small waist, and baby-making hips. I knew that this body was a weapon, but I also considered it to be sacred, something that I would give and share with only one special person. Oh, I used to want to do that when I was a virgin. That was my plan. Oh, well, don't get me wrong. I was as hot as any other young woman. The only difference was that in high school, all of my sexual affairs happened inside my mind. I had steamy fantasies about certain brothers who I considered to be strong, men who would have never thought that I'd be thinking of them in that way because I had deliberately misled them with my intelligent ways. But I had them sexually without their permission and to my own extreme pleasure because I truly was the only one who could feel the heat of my fantasies. But everything would change now because at college I would be with thousands and thousands of other anonymous people and hundreds of black men to choose from. I was sure that at least one of them would like me. College will bust your eyes wide open. I came from a home where I didn't really date and all of that, and got to college and whoo, it just so many people just like stopping you on the street and telling you you're beautiful. They meet you in class, and the little dating apps was out. Oh, beautiful black men. I'm not proud. We all had to go through it, but let me not forget Chuck, my high school boyfriend whom I dated for 2 years. Hold on, I'm tearing this book apart. My high school boyfriend whom I dated for 2 years. But he was awkward. So awkward that even after 17 years of being a virgin on my 18th birthday, I gave him some. But still consider myself to be a virgin because he didn't know what he was doing. And I certainly didn't feel the way I felt when I had my fantasy affairs. Still, he was the only boy who wasn't scared of me. He was respectful, intelligent, and treated me well. But now I was in college, a virgin once removed. Who nonetheless still felt obligated to be loyal to Chuck, who was also far away at another school. But somehow I knew that something or someone was headed my way. My roommate Mona arrived later that night. I was glad to see her because the first days of college are lonely even though you are meeting a lot of people. She came with a tall guy who I assumed was her man, but as I watched him complain about having to carry her stuff up the stairs and the stupid way that she packed and mixed things up, I knew it could only be her brother. Mona was tall, or about 2 inches taller than me. I was 5'6". That's how tall I am, which most people consider tall for a girl. Yeah, I'm not even that tall. People are like, oh, your long legs. They're not even that long, but okay. She had rich brown skin complexion and she was beautiful. Not just in the sense that she had a nice, thick, healthy body, but she was fashionable. I could tell that she was from the city because when I used to live in New York, I too had been fashionable. In New York, you had to have your gear and clothes correct or you would be a complete outcast. I kept up when I was in New York because I had to, and believe me, a lot of kids were doing crazy shit just to keep their clothes up to date. As I watched Mona unpack, I told her some of the things she had missed in the first freshman orientation. I was mostly quiet, though, because I had learned that with girls, you always had to check the vibe. I had to observe and decide whether Mona was confident or insecure, whether she was high-strung or relaxed, and whether she wanted to be friends or strictly business. After about 2 hours, I decided that she was very confident, so confident that she wouldn't be catty like a lot of women, nor would she launch some secret war game competition between us. She was friendly, talkative, and I could tell that she realized that as a freshman she would need a friend and hanging buddy just like I would. We were both hungry, so we used our temporary meal cards and headed over to the cafeteria. In the cafeteria, I was fascinated. I had come from a big family, and one helping was all you could get. If you were late getting home from school, you'd be lucky to find your portion of the dinner left over. But here in college cafeteria, I could eat anything and everything I wanted. I went buck wild. I ate 2 dinners, which included 2 bowls of French fries covered with melted cheese and cake and ice cream for dessert. Mona warned me, girl, you're going to get fat. Sitting across from us were two juniors. One of them sarcastically asked me, "Have you ever heard of the freshman 10?" I said, "No, what is that?" She said, "The freshman 10 is the 10 pounds most freshmen gain within the first 2 months of college. At the rate you're going, girl, it'll be 20, not 10." They all laughed. Just then, a few brothers passed by our table with their trays. One of them looked good to me. I must have been staring because the other junior girl quickly said, "Don't even waste your time, girl. He hits all the freshman women, makes them all feel special. One semester later, they crying and wanting to drop out and carry on. The boy been here 5 years and got it so good, he don't even want to graduate." They laughed again. I felt embarrassed that I had been so obvious. The big mouth girl then added, "Freshman women ain't considered nothing around here but pieces of meat. These dudes is like sharks smelling blood. But y'all are dumb and young, so I'll warn you. But you'll give them some anyway because you think the goddamn world revolves around you." Maybe she was telling the truth, I thought. Maybe she was lying. Maybe the guy I was staring at had screwed her and dumped her, and that's the real reason why she's so bitter. Maybe the men ain't all that bad, and it's just that she's ugly and full of gossip, so they can't tolerate her. Maybe she's in love with the guy I was staring at, and she just doesn't want him to like me or me to like him. When we got back to the room, I asked Mona what she thought of the girls at dinner. She said that Big Mouth was probably right. She said guys seemed to like playing mind games and hurting sisters. It made them feel large. She added that we should be careful because we were new. We would have to find out who everybody was before we started making any silly moves. It was good advice. Besides, I didn't want to marry or even jump in bed with that guy. I was just enjoying the way he looked. Wednesday was pub night, and after a week of standing on lines, registering, buying books, getting special permission from the deans to enter into courses that were already overbooked, I was down to go to the pub. I never drank alcohol. I heard that was the main attraction to the pub, but for me, it was the music. Music always had a strong effect on me. I could listen to a gospel record and be overwhelmed by a spiritual feeling that made me want to cry. I could listen to jazz music and be submerged in deep thought about why the world was arranged the way it was. I could listen to one of my grandmother's blues albums and experience the emotions of the singer as if they were my own. Or I could listen to rap music whose beats drove me in so many different directions. It could make me feel overtly sexual and controlled by the drum beat, or it could bring to mind the urgency of the poor condition of black people in this country. Rap spoke of many things, from Almond Joy to Public Enemy to Ice Cube was a trip from a hot sexual sweat to critical thinking to a directed rage. So I was going to the pub to feel the music and have it take me away in what I consider the most natural and safe way to get high. The pub played music. Most college kids was not into hip-hop yet. It didn't matter since the beats were there. The place was jam-packed with people, brothers and sisters all looking and smelling good, some standing around talking, some smoking, drinking, and dancing. I moved straight to the middle of the dance floor, moving my body with the rhythms and sensuality the music made me feel, not caring that I was dancing alone. I be doing that sometimes. That's what self-love will do for you. Can't wait on other people to have a good time. I knew my bold ways would get me some of the attention I wanted, but when that attention came, I was determined to act like I didn't notice it. After all, half the battle in college, it was starting to seem to me, even after only 1 week, was to be able to distinguish yourself from all the other women. It seemed, it seemed to me that there were at least 4 times as many black females as there were black men at the college. Once I got into the groove, I forgot about getting attention as I listened to lyrics about the pain of love. And although I had fantasized about the pleasures and companionship of love, it was precisely the pain that I intentionally avoided. And as I moved, I wonder whether it was the men or the women who were at the root of the problem of our relationships with one another. I decided it was both. When I looked up, I realized I had an uninvited guest. There was a brother dancing with me. It was cool, though. I enjoyed his company and the challenge as we tried to outmove each other. It was hard to wake up the next morning. I had a class called Black Education. For the first time, I had a professor, a black man, admit that racism was and still is a monumental problem that plagues America and destroys the lives of black people. He asked us to read a book called Institutional Racism in America. I must say I lost 20 pounds of high blood pressure from the class discussion, because instead of having the usual discussion of whether racism existed or was it a figment of the imagination of over 30 million black people in America, we had a full exploration in its forms and manifestations. After class, I rushed to the college bookstore, excited because I did not know that books like the ones my professor assigned existed. While searching the shelves of African studies, I got sidetracked by the many other interesting books that books like the ones my professor assigned existed. While searching the shelves of African studies, I got sidetracked by the many other interesting books that were available. I was overwhelmed and angry at the same time. That's how I was when I took my African American studies courses in college. I was just learning so much about our people and what I didn't know. And that ended up becoming my minor in college because I took so many classes just because I was interested that they was like, you may as well minor in this, girl. Angry because my high school teachers were either completely ignorant or had hidden the information from me. Overwhelmed because I intended to read all of these books. Overwhelmed because I realized that when information is relevant to an individual's life and culture, learning is fun, and unrelenting burning passion that cannot be subdued. Angry because all of the students who did not make it to college would never know all this stuff existed, and even their pitiful local public library might not offer such a selection. As I was flipping through the pages of Carter G. Woodson's Miseducation of a Negro, if you haven't read it, you definitely need to get it, a tall, very dark-skinned brother stood in front of me and said, "Read it. Every college student should." I smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm going to check it out, but I have to read Institutional Racism in America first." He said, "Yeah, I read that one too. It'll definitely open your eyes to what's going on in the world." He held out his hand to me and introduced himself. "Nathan." I told him my name and he invited me for a drink. When I told him I didn't drink alcohol, he looked surprised. "I saw you at the pub last night." "I don't drink, but I do dance." "How old are you?" 18. Suddenly, he seemed to lose interest. He said, "Excuse me, I didn't realize you were still a baby." I calmly said, "So, how old are you, old man?" 23. Senior political science and history double major. I reached up, grabbed my copy of Institutional Racism, and said, "Peace, take it easy." As I walked to the computer to pay, I thought about how ugly he was. He was black. Black as the ashes from the incinerator from my old building in the projects. Or as kids around my way would say, he was so black he was blue. I decided he should be happy I even gave him 5 minutes of my time. I then dismissed him from my thoughts, paid for the book, and headed to my room to do some reading. I read the book like a starving man would eat a fish sandwich. I want a fish sandwich. Each sentence prompted a new thought, and I began connecting each thought introduced in the book to the things that had happened in my life or to the people I loved. I began to understand a little more about my community in the Bronx, how I was organized, how I was not organized, and how it got to be so miserable in the first place. I stayed up the whole night reading. Early in the afternoon the next day, I was done. I checked the reading list and saw that the next assignment for this class was a book entitled Black Bourgeoisie by E. Franklin Frazier. I happily went off to my 2:30 English class. Immediately after, I went directly to the bookstore to pick up Black Bourgeoisie. That night, Mona came in looking down and out. She was enrolled in the School of Engineering, which required a great deal of study and concentration. "What's up, girl?" she replied. "Work, work, and more work." I said, "It's good to be on top of things, but you have to have something that makes you feel relieved so you can relax for a while." She looked through me as if she wasn't listening. I said, "All right, let's work until 10, and after that, we can go to the hut and get some tea and donuts." She told me she was down to take a break at 10, and we both went to our desk to do our work. The hut was a cool place where you could get a snack without the hustle and bustle and bright lights of the cafeteria. Plus, you could hear relaxing music and could play games, watch television, music, or videos. The best thing was the speakeasy on Friday nights where students got to stand up and present their thoughts, works of poetry, rap, essays, and comments. When the speakeasy began, a brother got up and started going off on the black woman. He said that sisters on campus want to be down with the white woman's movement, but the white woman's movement had nothing to do with African women. He said that we as African women came from the opposite side of town and had a different set of concerns more relevant to our survival as a people. Too many black women were copying white women, walking around campus half naked, and then had the nerve to get mad when a brother took a long look. If black women want to be respected, he said, they have to respect themselves. He said that we must divorce ourselves from white society's definition and description of womanhood and present ourselves in a light where a man can get to know our minds instead of just running through our bodies. Okay, sir. The student host opened the floor for discussion. I found myself standing up. Although I thought I agreed with most of his comments, I was always ready to test and see if somebody was sincere or if they was just talking. "I agree that we sisters could dress more modestly, brother, but I found that brothers like yourself say you have these high standards for women, and then we find you chasing after the precise woman and you say we should not dress like." "Ooh, that's true." Now, if I get lonely enough and I think a miniskirt is the only way to get your attention, I put it on. Everybody started laughing. Sister said, right on, girl. Word up. You tell him. Looking like he was shocked to be challenged, I figured he probably gave the same speech every couple of weeks. He gripped his microphone and said, with all due respect, my sister, I'm not one of these brothers who says one thing and does the opposite. I don't chase after naked women. I judge a woman by her mind. Of course, this sounded too good to be true to me, so I said, oh yeah? So where's your woman at tonight? If you're a fair-minded brother like you say you are, wouldn't your woman be here with you sharing in the discussion? Or are you one of these brothers that talks about a sister building up her mind and then wraps her up in the sheet and locks her in the house so she can't use it? Suddenly, everybody was heated and involved in the discussion. Some were laughing so hard they seemed to be picking themselves up from the floor. Stuck for words, the brother groped and said, yes, I have a woman, but she's not here because she's in the Loeb Library studying. I smiled and said, it's real hard to believe there's a sister here at our university where there are 4 black women to every one brother who knows her man is on stage at the hut in front of all these women, and she chose to let him come out all alone. All hell broke loose. The sister started clapping, and the brother said, all right, my sister, here, you take the mic. That's when I decided to sit down. Meanwhile, sister got up on the mic, short hair, cut like a man's, nappy with long earrings and real dark skin. She said, now, I love myself, but I gotta wonder why nobody loves me when I am you. The audience looked confused by her statement, so she repeated it, and silence fell on the room. She said, let me break it down for you. As you can see, I am dark-skinned, dark like midnight. That means that I am African. We as Africans, and really before we even got that name, were the first people on this earth. We were created over 2 million years ago in the image of God. If Africans were the first people created in the image of God, then God must have been black. And if God is black and most of us say that we love God, why do we hate ourselves? One sister responded angrily, how do you figure we hate ourselves? The dark girl replied, well, there isn't one brother in this university, my sisters, who wouldn't rather date you as a light-skinned, hazel-eyed sister than me as a dark-skinned sister I am. Brothers won't even look at me. They will automatically go to a light-skinned sister. Then she placed her hands on her hips and rolled her necks and said, but we don't want to talk about that now, do we? Once again, silence. Well, she commanded, all I am asking is that when you look at me, you realize that I am you. And if you hate me, you hate yourself and who we are as a people. She placed the mic in the microphone stand and calmly walked off the stage. Even though I had had fun shouting down the brother, the words of this sister, the truth of her words, stabbed me directly in my heart. Although she directed her comments toward the brothers, I, too, was guilty of the same kind of self-hatred that she spoke about. To be sure, I never wanted to be light-skinned. I felt good about being brown, but black was far too extreme for me. I hated black, dark black, and when I would see it, just like she said, I would not look any further. Not at the eyes, the lips, the teeth, nothing. So she taught me a lesson when I had no intention of learning anything in the hut that night. I thought about how I had routinely dismissed the brother at the bookstore the other day. I even went so far as to believe I had done him a favor simply by talking to him. So I was guilty of self-hatred and never knew it. Funny thing was, brown-skinned sisters hated to be put down by light-skinned sisters, but I had never thought about how we all put down black-skinned brothers and sisters. Not me. I like 'em brown and under. Give them to me damn near burnt, baby. That's just my preference. My thing, I'm the opposite. I be prejudiced against, and forgive me for saying this, I'm working on it. I be prejudiced against lighter skinned brothers. Not the women. I'm talking about what I'm attracted to. I feel like the closer in color you are to the oppressor, the less attracted I am. Now I've seen some fine lighter skinned brothers, but I just personally I like them brown skin and under. I like dark skin. I just do. Anyways, Mona interrupted my thoughts. This nose ring is bothering me, y'all. Sorry, y'all. It won't stay in my nose. Alright. Mona interrupted my thoughts. Why do you get so involved in this shit? People are just talking. It's a speakeasy. I looked at Mona and said, excuse me, didn't she give you something to think about? Mona spit back, I already had too much to think about. I came here to relax, not to think. Besides, I can't solve the problems of the world. We paid the bill and left. How many of us think like that? We go places and because we had a long day of work or we got kids and stuff, we hear something that resonates and sound good that we know is good for us, but we don't want to tune into it because we didn't come here to think. We just dismiss it. It's not my problem. It is our problem. It's everybody's problem. As the semester came to a close, everything became routine. It was 1 week before final exams, and I knew I had grown both intelligently and spiritually. I had learned the valuable lesson that the more you think you know, the less you know. The more willing you are to learn, the more likely you are to seek and find, only to discover that there is still so much more. The parties at the pub became pretty regular, and after the first couple of weeks, I started to memorize the faces. Some people became couples, and some people just humped because it felt good for the moment. Although I longed for companionship, I discovered so much comfort and peace of mind in my newfound books. I continued my self-examination. I used Carter Woodson's book to bring my address to I used Carter Woodson's book to bring to address my 18 years of miseducation. One day while sitting in the hut, I was cramming for my upcoming English exam. It was something I had to do since I hated the Canterbury Tales and the ramblings of old English literary giants who damn near nobody could understand. As I stumbled through my notes, up walked Nathan, who, without hesitation, invited himself to sit down. Every time I see you, you have your head in a book. Do you take time out? Time out for what? I replied. Kicking back, he said. Listen, I stay up late, live in your building on the 3rd floor. You're on the 7th, right? So, come check me out. We'll talk and listen to some music. What do you take me for, freshman meet? No, don't bug out. It's just that we all finish our work late at night. Anyway, you won't be the only one there. Come on down and kick it with us tonight. Just as I got ready to tell him I had to finish studying, he said, I know you got to study, so I'll see you later. Later that night, I debated whether I should go down to see Nathan. I was bored, and Mona was studying for her exam the next day. I put on my baggy pants and oversized sweatshirt so I would look as unsexy as possible. I didn't want him to get the wrong impression, and frankly, I didn't feel attracted to him. I was going for the conversation, which I had discovered was hard to come by and was to be treasured if I could find a good one. As I approached Nathan's door, I heard voices and could smell incense. I was relieved that other people were there. I knocked, and a girl I had seen around campus opened the door. She looked at me, and almost instantly I could tell she liked Nathan because she gave me that black woman eye roll. He couldn't see her reaction, and when he saw me, a bright smile stretched across his face. There was a brother there also. Nathan introduced them both. The girl was Jessica, and the brother's name was Jamal. Another knock came at the door, and a brother named Russell joined us. I learned that they had been talking about Middle Eastern politics. Nathan had just finished reading The Question of Palestine by Edward Said. Is it Said or Said? It might be Said. Edward Said. They were debating who was wrong and who was right in the Middle East conflict. Nathan was the most talkative as he knew all of the heads of state in the Middle Eastern area. Later that night, I learned Nathan was a Muslim. Russell was a Christian. Nathan tried to argue the Middle East was actually geographically part of Africa. He told Russell that as a black man and African, he should be on the side of the Palestinians. That it was not a question of Muslim versus Christian, but rather a question of white European domination of people of color all around the world. Russell disagreed, and as the debate heated up, he declared that the argument was not going anywhere and that he had an exam tomorrow, and so he would be leaving. Jamal exited a few minutes later on Russell's heels. The hour was late, but my eyes were wide as plums. I was fascinated. I had just heard a conversation about a subject I knew absolutely nothing about. I was thrilled because I hardly ever had met people who were serious about learning and serious about understanding issues, people who could support their arguments with intricate details backed up by a number of books read on the topic. I felt embarrassed because I had assumed Nathan was sweating me and just wanted some pussy. Instead, it felt like an honor to be in his presence, to listen to his voice, and to be able to share his wealth of knowledge. Yes, honey, teach me. Okay. Learn me something. Sorry, I gotta get my water intake. Jessica was older than I was, a senior. She acted as though she had these types of conversations before. When she realized that even though it was getting late, I wasn't budging, she got up, rolled her eyes, and said she was going to bed and that we should all do the same. I enjoyed the little competition she stirred, but I still had tons of questions to ask Nathan. And besides, I wanted his reading list of the Middle East. Nathan got up and lit another incense stick. Like a man and a lot of incense stick, honey. It created a sweet and fresh smell in the room, unlike the usual funk of college dormitories. As Jessica walked out, Nathan walked her down the hall, and I imagined him having to listen to her complain about why I wasn't leaving too. I looked around the room. It looked unusually clean and organized for a man. The books were neatly arranged in the bookshelf. The Holy Quran was prominently featured on its own wooden carved stand, and everything seemed perfect. As Nathan came back through the door, I realized he was quite tall, well over 6 feet. He sat down on the chair at his desk and smiled at me and said, "Finally, what do I owe you for coming to see a lowlife like me?" His teeth were white and bright against his jet black skin. "I guess I should pay you for the lessons," I replied. "Free of charge. We're here every night debating, discussing, and sharpening our skills." His lips were thick, thicker than the lips of any man I had ever taken the time to notice. His nose was wide, and it struck me that this night was the first night I took the time to notice the details, the structure, the ins and outs of anyone's face whose complexion was so dark. His cheekbones were pronounced and formed like a masculine African carving. His eyes were big, but not big and dreamy like a Walt Disney character. They were big and powerful like the eyes I had recently seen on the African masks that were depicted in my history books. "It's good to see you," he said. "I heard what you did a couple of months ago in the hut at the speakeasy. Man, Tarif came by after that and couldn't stop talking about you. You blew his head off." "I was just messing with him." "Are you in the Nation of Islam?" I asked. "No, I'm Orthodox." "So how is it that you started drinking alcohol?" "Sharp mind. Good question. At the same time you saw me in the bookstore, I was backsliding." "Do you do that for convenience?" He smiled. "Real sharp. No, it's a weakness." This was the first time I had ever heard a brother voluntarily admit to a weakness. "Ideally, I know what I like to be, but I've always said if you can wake up in the morning and like what you see in the mirror, you're doing better than most people." "What religion are you?" "I was born and raised a Christian in a non-denominational church. We believe in God and we don't discriminate. My great-grandmother is the pastor and her 14 children are the deacons and deaconesses." He smiled. He again smiled. "You know, you're beautiful. Not just your body or your face, although that all looks good, but there's a light that you have, a spiritual light. I feel the need to be around you in that light. It's very powerful and good, but not many could stand it." I wasn't sure what Nathan was talking about, but I was completely flattered. "So," he said, like a lawyer or a detective, "you don't smoke either?" "Nope," I responded. He laughed lightly and said with a sigh of relief, "A no drinking, no smoking, no sleeping around Christian girl. Well, now, that's rare." "How do you know I don't sleep around?" I teased. "Because I would have heard about it. I done some checking." "Listen," he said, "give me your phone number at home. Maybe we can get together over your Christmas holiday. When are you leaving the dorm?" "In 2 days," I said. He said, "Yeah, me too. Come back tomorrow night and we'll talk before I go back to Brooklyn." By the time I got back to my room, it was 4:30 in the morning. I miss those days in college where you just had like late night talks with a bunch of people and y'all been learning stuff all day. And like even it was one of my friends named Travis. He's married to one of my sorority sisters now, and he used to have these meetings at his house, and it felt like a Black Panther meeting. We would just talk about all kind of stuff, and it was so great to just like be with like minds and have debates and discussions and be up late and the good old days. College was really great for networking and socializing. The next day, I spent packing up my few valuables and safely packing away my notes. Even though the semester was over, I did not want to throw away my notes. I was like that too, Souljah. I still got all my notes. I figured I would keep them and somehow use them later. I might need to go back through, relearn something. I figured I could keep them and somehow use them later. I had learned so much. I told Mona about my night at Nathan. She told me to watch out because although Nathan seemed pretty smooth, the bottom line is probably still the same. That night I went downstairs to Nathan's. Once again, he and Russell and Jamal were arguing. Tonight's debate was over Malcolm X, what he had thought and who he had become the year before his death, and what was the significance of his philosophy anyway. Now, this was a hot topic, hotter than the night before. Everyone was just jumping right in and verbally slugging it out. Once again, I sat there and listened, not because I didn't have an opinion. I definitely had an opinion on this one. I sat quietly because once again, I was shocked to find conversation that went beyond the level of jokes like your mother's ass is so wide and the last time you saw your father. Russell was frustrated. Nathan, he charged, was being dishonest because he knew good and well that Malcolm, at the end of his life, believed there were some good white folks in the world. Nathan disagreed, insisting that what Malcolm had said was that he realized that through Islam and the practice of internalizing Islam, white people who were usually power-hungry, unjust, warlike, and greed-driven could become civilized. Nathan described Malcolm's transformation as an even greater challenge to white America to change the immorality of its ways. Russell searched the room for anybody to support not only what he was saying, but the style in which he was saying it. His eyes landed on me. Looking directly at me, eyeball to eyeball, he said, "I hear you're a very nice Christian girl. Now, I'm a Christian too. Would you agree that after Malcolm's pilgrimage to Mecca, he believed in the brotherhood of all men?" For the first time, I was being dragged into one of these emotionally charged debates. These brothers and sisters were so much older than I. I was slightly intimidated, so I chose my words carefully. I said that I believe Malcolm always believed in the brotherhood of man, before Mecca and even after his so-called transformation. This was a brotherhood that he believed could only be achieved by destroying racism and achieving equal power, resources, land, money, and access to opportunity. Above all, Malcolm believed that without power, black people would never be treated with justice or be considered as part of the brotherhood of man. The black man would in fact be used, dominated, and destroyed by the same brotherhood because there could be no justice in a relationship where one group of people were kept non-productive, dependent, and ignorant. Jamal smiled and Nathan put his head down as though he felt embarrassed for Russell. Russell said, "Are you saying that during Malcolm's involvement with the well-known race prejudice group, the Nation of Islam, he believed in brotherhood?" "Yes, and I'm saying he believed in justice. The Nation of Islam, in Malcolm's opinion, was the greatest vehicle in organizing black people for justice, productivity, morality, and self-sufficiency." "Then why did Malcolm call the white man the blue-eyed devil?" "Because," I explained, "of the evil and devilish things that white people have done collectively to other races of people while pretending to believe in democratic principles, liberty, and justice." "Are you a Muslim?" Russell asked, raising his voice. "No, I'm a Christian," I said calmly. "Do you believe the white man is the devil?" "I believe that he's doing a good job of convincing our people that he is, even if we as Christians were inclined to argue that he is not." Russell was pissed and he blurted out, "That's not a Christian way of thinking." Still calm but indignant, I said, "By whose book?" "In my Bible, Christ is for justice. He is for brotherhood, but not at the expense of justice." Russell looked at Nathan and said, "All right, man, I'm breaking out. I think you got a budding black radical on your hands." In full sarcasm, he then turned to me and said, "You got to relax. Tone it down some. Even Nathan enjoys a nice white girl every now and then." He smiled and slipped out the door. The topics changed again and again, and different people moved in and out of Nathan's room. As the early morning hours approached, only Nathan and myself were left sitting alone again. Russell's parting words kept echoing in my mind. So I asked quietly, "Is it true?" "Is what true?" "Is it true that you enjoy a white girl every now and then?" Nathan's eyes tried to avoid mine. "Well, is it?" "I don't know what you bugging out about. There was a time, not too long ago in fact, when I couldn't get a sister like yourself to even look in my direction. Sisters got the attitude that blackness is some kind of disease." I knew his words were true, but it still sounded like a poor excuse to me. "Don't make excuses for yourself. If you like white girls, blame it on yourself, not on the sisters. What about Jessica? Was she too black for you, or are you guilty of the same things that sisters are?" "Jessica," he said, "was desperate and lonely. Have you ever heard her say anything? Have you ever heard her join in the conversation? Hell no. She just sits there on the edge of the bed with a lot of space between her ears, hoping that since she's willing to overlook the color thing, I'll be willing to overlook the fact that she hasn't paid any attention to her own development. I don't know if you've noticed, but sisters around campus don't have much going on. They may go to class, but they may be on the verge of graduating, but in the final analysis, there's not much real thinking going on in those pretty little heads of theirs." I agree. "Yeah," I said, "what you're saying may or may not be true. Sisters might fall short of your standard, but there's no reason to go and unite with a white girl who, no matter what she says, is part of the problem. It's not the answer. It's a contradiction and an out of contradiction. It's a contradiction and out contradiction. With sisters being 4-to-1 on this campus, it's wrong for any black man to be loving a white woman. Of course, the white girls might be more advanced in some ways, but they've had greater opportunities, different environments, and a whole lot of time to devise ways to divide the black man from the black woman when we are, in fact, naturally supposed to be together." Nathan simply smiled and said, "Point well taken." The university gave us nearly 5.5 weeks of vacation. Being home meant that I had to listen to everyone tell me how fat I had gotten. My freshman 20. Having been away from my family, I felt I could see more clearly the changes they had been going through during my absence. I felt that my family had grown further apart. My younger sister, just 13 years old, was showing signs of being fast, especially for her age. My other sister, in the absence of the pressure that I usually placed on her to get herself together, had become far too accepting and lazy about her lack of progress and direction in life. My older brother seemed self-absorbed and unable or unwilling to do anything about the declining status of our family. My mother was still exhausting herself, chasing plan after fruitless plan in search of the American dream, hoping to rid herself of her welfare reality. I went out with Chuck only to discover that although he was a true friend, someone who truly loved me and I him, there simply was no heat between us. The fact was, he was boring and had little to talk about other than his second year at one of the best science universities in the country, where he spent all of his time in the computer room or laboratory. While I admired him because he seemed to have his life so well planned, I couldn't find a sense of excitement and depth. Maybe the gulf between us was too great. Between his ultra middle class, two professional parent family, two cars, the sun always shines neighborhood, and my Section 8 government subsidized single female headed household underclass reality. I tried to understand what was missing. I kept thinking it was his lack of sense of struggle, but was this his problem or mine? Was I glorifying the need to struggle? Did I somehow envy his family because they had properly planned ahead and taken advantage of the few gains that were achieved during the rebellion of African people in America? Did my uneasiness have to do with how his somewhat prosperous family seemed so content while the vast majority of our community was dying? Did they accept me because I was educated and would not therefore pose an embarrassment to their class pretensions, or did any of that matter to them at all? Well, no matter whose problem it was, mine or Chuck's, I kept hoping Nathan would call. I dashed up the stairs every time the phone rang, but 6 days later, still no call from Nathan. I stopped running up the stairs and let my little sister answer the phone. I began to look up a few of my old high school acquaintances just to kill time. One day, while sorting the laundry with my mother and sister, the phone rang. My sister answered and handed it to me, saying it was somebody named Nathan. I smiled so wide I knew my family would ask questions when I hung up. Nevertheless, I was careful not to betray my eagerness to Nathan. I tried to act as though I hadn't been hoping that he would call. "What's up? How you doing?" "I'm coolin'." Then Nathan asked, "You want to hang out in New York with me? We can check a movie or a club and go get some dinner." I said softly, "Sure, why not?" I hung up the phone as my little sister danced around the room teasing, "Ooh, you cheating on Chuck, cheating on Chuck, cheating on Chuck." I told her to shut up. I didn't feel I was cheating because I had never touched Nathan. Besides, we were just talking. And anyway, Chuck wasn't filling me up enough mentally and spiritually, not to mention physically. My day with Nathan began in the early afternoon when he came to pick me up. We went to Manhattan's Lower East Side, and he showed me the little news shops where political and economic journals from around the world could be bought. He stressed the importance of getting the alternative opinions and assessments rather than relying on the ones given by the American government and some objective professors. He cautioned me about trusting the media. He told me how the news and television stations tried to control the flow of information concerning African people and all people of color. This is so true. Excuse me. He said they attempted to shape public opinion and went so far as to create facts to lie to the people in interest of maintaining their own power. He had a backpack full of information and showed me documents on different places around the world. He added that he thought I had done a good job of learning about domestic racism and the black experience in America, but then I had to begin to see and understand how these racist institutions of power existed everywhere in the world, wherever African and Latino people lived, and tried to organize to control their own lives, land, food, and resources. Out of his inside coat pocket came what he called a gift. It was a copy of a book he had been impressed by, called The Pawns in the Game. Later, we went up to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which had a limited holiday engagement of the treasures of ancient Egypt. Nathan explained everything that he said the tour guide had left out. He pointed out the facial features of the African art, the wide nose, thick lips, and strong cheek and jaw bones. He said that in the past, these features had been considered beautiful, but what white civilization had taught African people to hate themselves. He said they did this for two reasons. One was to be able to control our minds and thus our dollars, gold, oil, land, and all the riches of African people. The second was to get us to abandon our own belief system, our own culture, our own way of organizing life so that we would forget how to live and prosper and have to depend completely on whites for everything. At the root of it all, he added, was greed and jealousy. He laughed a painful laugh and told me the story about how Napoleon in Egypt, consumed by envy, blew off the nose of the great Sphinx because the wide nose clearly confirmed that it was a great African creation that symbolized our originality and superiority in geometry, architecture, mathematics, and art. He told me that as the result of all these years and centuries of oppression and thievery over the Africans had resulted in our complete psychological, economic, spiritual, and practical dependency on white people, that our minds were actually so destroyed that we found it hard to do such basic things as love each other and see the goodness and value in ourselves. He ended my lesson by telling me that the reason the exhibit was called Egyptian and not African was because white scholars wanted the world to believe that the Egyptians were non-African, light-complected Phoenicians. That this they did so African people would feel we had contributed nothing to civilization, and that the great and original treasures of the world that we Africans had conceived were created, and had conceived and created were not actually ours. Y'all know how like the what's that movie Cleopatra or something, and all them white people in it. All them white people in that desert. And no Egypt. Leaving the museum, we went to a health food restaurant and sat down to have dinner. Nathan smiled and with a look of guilt said, I brought you here because you were starting to look like 2 tons of fun. I just thought I wouldn't add to your weight problem. Oh my God. He began to crack up, clearly amused by his own fat jokes, flashing his beautiful white teeth. My heart stood still as I realized that I had actually gained 20 pounds since starting college. But I played Nathan's remark off. Nathan started talking about his family. He had 4 sisters and no brothers. He had a hard-working mother and father whose presence was more like an absence. He asked me if I'd like to meet them. I said definitely. After dinner, we went to his home. Everybody in his family was very dark in skin color, and his mother was overbearing and suspicious of any newcomers. She struck me as the type who would compete with any girl who wanted the affections of her son. Nathan's sisters were also possessive, and they inspected me as though it was their job to issue a certificate either authorizing me or keeping me from dating their brother. Because they didn't seem to take me seriously at all, I assumed that Nathan probably brought a lot of girls home. After the whole phony exchange with his family, Nathan took me to the bus stop to put me on a bus that would take me back to New Jersey. He didn't try to kiss me, which was cool because I didn't feel comfortable yet. Just before I got on the bus, he said, you know, you're a beautiful girl, but we have to work on you. I like girls with natural hair. I've always wondered why you have that fake extra piece of weave. We got to work on you. I like girls with natural hair. I've always wondered why you have that fake extra piece of hair weaved in the back of your head. Does it give you that much more of sense of security and value? I was astounded. Nobody had ever mentioned my weave. I had always acted as if it was my own hair. How could he be so insensitive? All I'm saying is that I think your hair is beautiful. Maybe you can think of something else to do with it. Oh, and follow that healthy menu we had tonight. It's better for your system to eat light. I smiled meekly and got on the bus. Now, most women today would probably just take what he says super offensively and take it as, why you judging me? I'm big, black, and beautiful. Take me or leave me, and get all upset and might miss out on a good man. But I feel that there's a way to approach things. I had a guy at one point in time that like he would make me feel down and bad about my weight and was like forcing me to go to the gym and forcing me to do a certain amount of miles before I could get certain privileges from him and things like that. And it didn't make me feel good about myself, and I really wasn't going to the gym for me. I was going because I felt like I had to achieve whatever goals he set out so that I could receive some type of affection or attention from him. And sure enough, I done gained it back. But now I'm in the gym again for me, for my own health reasons, not to please somebody else. But I think that especially when you are courting or even dating somebody, more so when you're dating somebody, if you see certain things that they're doing or habits that they're taking on that is not really serving them or that healthy, and you love them, I think it's okay to express that, you're concerned for them. But delivery is everything. You can't just come out, oh, you fat, you need to lose weight. Like, we're emotional beings, although that's true. Your bluntness sometimes, or your delivery of it, can really affect us emotionally. So we have to learn how to communicate in a way where it's like, it's loving. And I think he did an all right job, but he made her challenge herself. He made her think. And I've had that happen too. Guys have said certain things about my appearance or things like that it kind of made me think, like, I'm content, I'm being okay with it, but other people are noticing some unhealthy decisions I'm making as well. The next day, I went to the store straight to the exercise section and bought a Richard Simmons exercise album. I took it home, put on some workout clothes, and asked my younger sister to be my instructor. She enjoyed being able to give me orders for a change. I gave one of my other sister's girlfriends, Gina from the Bronx, a call and went to get my own hair braided into a natural style, cornrows going up into a small ponytail. This was the style I used to wear to camp in the summer when I was younger. For 4.5 weeks, I exercised rigorously, 2 sides of the album every day. I ate only tuna on wheat bread and a glass of juice for lunch and fish or chicken and salad for dinner. As my body was young, it wasn't hard to reform, and I was looking damn good for my return to the university. The odd thing was that Nathan had never called me back since the day we spent together. I blamed myself and my appearance for his disappearance and decided I would simply use my time constructively to correct my own problems. Plus, I wasn't gonna call him. I felt he owed me that courtesy. When Mona saw me, When Mona saw me, she dropped on her bed and said, "What? Get the fuck out of here. Girl, you lost all that weight. You look good. I'm jealous. You got your hair done too." I told her about my date with Nathan and about all the things he said. Mona straightened out her face sternly and said, "Girl, why you let him talk to you that way?" I said, "It's nothing but constructive criticism. He was right, and look, it got me to fix the problem because I really did have a weight problem." She frowned. "It seems to me that he's got too much to say. And what about him? Just what does he have to fix?" "Nothing," I said. Mona shook her head in disbelief and said she knew that when I came back at 4:30 in the morning 2 nights in a row that I was too absorbed in him. I got annoyed and said, "So, what's up, Mona? You got something against men?" "Don't get me started," she said defiantly. "I grew up in New York City all my life. I got tons of stories." "So just 'cause you got stories, Mona, does that mean you give up on love?" "Love?" she shouted. "Now don't tell me you love that nigga." "No, I didn't say that. I'm just saying, don't you think that if you take time and try to find the right man, things can work out for the better?" "The right one. The right one." She threw her hands up in the air. "Where the fuck is the right one?" "Look, you're in engineering school, right? The whole point of being an engineer is to be a problem solver, to fix things that are broken and make a more advanced, less painful society for everybody. Either that," she interrupted, or to get crazy paid in a short amount of time so that you can tell everybody to get the fuck out of your face." She laughed sarcastically. My point is, in social relationships, things have to be fixed because our family structures have been so destroyed. Most of us, including you and I, find it hard to define what being a real man or woman is and what that means. "Yeah, whatever. Just be careful," Mona cautioned me, because I'm not as dumb as I may look. "Mona, you want to go jogging with me in the morning so I can maintain my weight?" I asked. "I'll go if you're doing it for yourself and not for him," she quipped. "Of course, it's just for me," I lied. All during the first 2 weeks of our new semester, I didn't hear from Nathan. I decided I wasn't going down to his room since he hadn't contacted me in what was now more than 6 weeks since our day in Manhattan. I dealt with my disappointment by becoming even more busy than usual. I drowned my desire for good conversation by working extra hard in my new classes. I began checking out some of the organizations on campus that I always told myself I would look into, but never did. Saturday morning when I woke up, Mona was already awake trying to solve some of her difficult equations. I decided to go jogging by myself. Before I left, I took a good look at Mona. Did she want to go to the hut tonight? It depended, she said, on whether she finished her equations or not. There was something in Mona's face which suggested that she was never happy or satisfied and was always frustrated over something. When I first met her, I would have never thought that somebody so pretty could have so many complaints. She claimed her frustration had everything to do with having chosen engineering as a major. Then why didn't she just change her major? She would simply shrug her shoulders and say, "I gotta do what I gotta do." For Mona, engineering was her ticket out of poverty. Failure was unthinkable, although I think she thought about it all the time. Failure was out of the question, so she worked overtime to prevent it from happening. Whatever Mona's problems was, It had caused an evident deep sadness in her, and I decided, as a friend and roommate, I should try to help her out. Later that evening, I pressured Mona into going to the hut with me, even though she still had work to do. I forced her to put it aside and pushed open her closet and said, "Let's get fly." I figured if we looked good, put her hair in a new style, and did our nails, we'd feel better. Plus, it would break the monotony of jeans and t-shirts. So we joked as her gloom began to lift. The hut was packed. A scheduled performance hadn't started yet. Mona ordered coffee and I ordered herb tea. We sat there laughing about the first half of our year in school and how naive we were. It was a relief to see Mona smile, and I knew I had done the right thing by keeping her out of the library that night. Just then, Tarsha and her sidekick Jackie came in and sat down at our table. Tarsha was a well-known figure around campus. She was in charge of university gossip and the juicy information hotline. She used her gossip to keep everyone's attention on her. While she spread all the news around, she disregarded the rumor about herself, about how she had gotten dogged by the most... Blah, blah, blah. Let me go back. Tarsha was a well-known figure around campus. She was in charge of university gossip and the juicy information hotline. She used her gossip to keep everyone's attention on her. While she spread all of the news around, she disregarded the rumor about herself, about how she had gotten dogged by almost the entire Omega Psi Phi fraternity and enjoyed every minute of it. She was respected by no one, but tolerated by everyone, at least for 15 minutes it took her to give the scoop. "What's up?" Tarsha said, always louder than everybody else in the room. "Hey, girl," me and Mona responded at almost the same time. "Girl, I heard you lost all that weight over the Christmas break, but I didn't believe it. But now that I look at you, it seems like you a whole nother person." "Thanks," I said sarcastically. "Girl," she continued, "if I didn't know any better, I swear you was smoking that crack over the holiday." She laughed, and so did Jackie. "Oh, wait a minute now. You got rid of that weave?" "Poof, just like that, it's gone. Better you than me, because between you and I ain't never getting rid of mine. It gets me too many looks." She laughed at her own joke. Then she turned to Mona and said, "You know my girl Charnay works in the center. She told me she saw you over there." "What center?" I interrupted. But Tarsha ignored my question in her rush to give us unsolicited list of everybody who had flunked out of school and the reason behind their dismissal. Soon the sound of her voice became so annoying that I just drowned her out and got into my own head. I could still see her lips moving, but I could no longer hear the words coming out. I began to look around the room, scanning all the faces. My eyes settled on a dark spot in the corner. There he was, Nathan, sitting in the corner, purposely avoiding the lights and sharing a conversation that he, judging from the look of delight on his face, was obviously enjoying with a green-eyed, brown-haired white girl. My face dropped on the floor, and before I could pick it up, Mona flagged her and said, "Girl, don't even worry about that." Tarsha chirped. "Worry about what?" "Worry about what?" "Nothing," Mona reprimanded instantly. But nosy-ass Tarsha saw the unbroken stare. I could not turn away from Nathan's corner table. She said, "You might as well forget that, girl. You won't even be able to—" "Shut the fuck up," Mona interrupted. Don't you ever stop talking?" Tarsha grabbed Jackie's arm and said, "You goddamn freshmen think you know every fucking thing. I was just trying to put you up on the scoop, but since y'all think the world revolves around you and can't appreciate a good friend, well, fuck you then." And they left. Mona looked at me and said, "Listen, girl, don't even play yourself. I told you these men got games for days." I got up from my chair, forgetting about Mona, and walked toward Nathan's table. I caught his eyes, even though I was halfway across the room. Our eyes locked, and I was sure that he could feel my silent rage. The more steps I took toward him, the more powerful I could feel myself become. As the energy swirled around the side of me, I released it by coordinating my thoughts with the sway of my hips. Shoulders back, head up high, I arrived at the table and stood blocking out the white girl and staring directly in Nathan's eyes. "Nathan," I said with quiet force. He smiled a smile of pure innocence, his white teeth lighting up, and said, "This is Astrid." With an enthusiasm that ignored my anger, he said, "Hi, here, have a seat. Gosh, your hair looks great. Where did you get it done? If I told you, you still wouldn't know." I looked at her intensely. Hold on. That was her speaking. "Nathan," I said with quiet force. He smiled a smile of pure innocence, his white teeth lighting up, and said, "This is Astrid." With an enthusiasm that ignored my anger, she said, excuse me, thought I had a burp. "Hi, here, have a seat. Gosh, your hair looks great. Where did you get it done? If I told you, you still wouldn't know." I looked at her intensely. Her skin was pale and completely devoid of color. Her nose was long and thin. Her teeth were somehow between off-white and egg yolk yellow. Yo, she ain't have to go in on the girl like that. Her teeth were between off-white and egg yolk yellow. Her eyes were green, big, and empty. While her hair was straight, there seemed to be some desperate attempt at cornrows as I saw 10 braids cascading down her back. I looked up at her and I felt superior, dominant, and far more beautiful. What offended me was the thought that Nathan, or any other black man for that matter, might be so foolish as to think of her as more beautiful. On the table lay How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. She apparently had put the book on the table in a conspicuous manner, as if she thought that any passing black person would instantly think, now, there's a cool white girl. Your hair does look beautiful, Nathan said. He looked into my eyes, and I could feel how much he liked me and how attracted he was. His eyes lowered from my eyes, and he swept by my breasts, my newly achieved firm waistline, and landed on my mother of the world hips. I felt his quiet desire, and so did she. She knew she couldn't fight the African body, and I was sure Nathan had seen it all. I sat down. It seemed to me that Astrid had decided to battle me on an intellectual level. She had assumed an air of mental superiority. I was just telling Nathan, she said, about my trip to Africa this past summer. Have you been there? No, I haven't, but I wouldn't have actually had to go there to know it. Oh, sure you would, she said. It's really different than America, and the Africans there are different than the blacks in America. Yes, I said, that's a typical outsider's view. But if you had grown up black in America, you would understand that white oppression manifests itself in the same place everywhere. I condescendingly offered an example. An African girl in South Africa is forbidden to speak her own native language. An African girl in America does not even know her own language. An African girl in South Africa is forbidden a proper education. An African girl in America is forbidden a proper education. Hold on, y'all. An African girl in South Africa is forbidden to speak her own native language. An African girl in America does not even know her own language. An African girl in South Africa is forbidden a proper education. An African girl in America is forbidden a proper education. An African girl in South Africa is likely to lose her father to the gold or coal mine or racist murder. An African girl in America either doesn't know her father at all or may easily lose him to unemployment or murder. In both countries, white people are the ruthless, evil rulers, and black people are the purposely confused and targeted victims. In both countries, white girls enjoy the privilege of being white, but want to sleep with the few surviving black men at the same time. You tell me, Astrid, what's the difference? For a few moments, her face filled with a plum-colored blankness, and I looked at Nathan's eyes, shining with the pride he tried to hide. I could tell he received some devilish enjoyment and a tremendous ego boost from the vision of two women both going for the jugular vein over him. I understand your hostility, countered Astrid, but there are some things you have willfully chosen to overlook. In both countries, there are good whites who try to help, who sincerely sympathize with the blacks. There's a tremendous amount of working together, and most blacks in both countries don't share your hostility, but are in fact very accepting and inviting to whites like myself. Then she looked toward Nathan, who did not return her stare. He looked between us into the space that divided me from her with a stern, smileless glare. What is the definition of a good white? I said. There's no such thing. Is that somebody who, while enjoying the money, privilege, and power that being white automatically offers them, does nothing but offers verbal sympathy to black people? Is that somebody who merely wishes that things will get better while having no intention of giving anything up or returning stolen land, stolen jewelry, stolen culture? Is that somebody who sends a check to a pacification program for blacks that gives out a turkey on Thanksgiving Day and cookies and Kool-Aid over the summer? Or is that somebody like you who joins black organizations to bless some beautiful black man with some dirty white pussy so the two of you can contribute some confused and befuddled mulatto children to the movement? Damn, she didn't have to go in on that girl like that. Lord. Now, I'm smart and I know some stuff, but I don't think I do the best engaging like that when it comes to these topics. Like when I be having these interactions with these white people, I just be so taken aback by like their ignorance and they're trying to assimilate to black culture that I get thrown off. I'm gonna reread that because I think that was good. What is the definition of a good white? There is no such thing. Is that somebody who, while enjoying the money, privilege, and power that being white automatically offers them, does nothing but offers verbal sympathy to black people? Is that somebody who merely wishes that things will get better while having no intention of giving anything up or returning stolen land, stolen jewels, stolen culture? Is that somebody who sends a check to a pacification program for blacks that gives out a turkey on Thanksgiving Day and cookies and Kool-Aid over the summer? Or is that somebody like you who joins black organizations to bless some beautiful black man with some dirty white pussy so the two of you can contribute some confused and befuddled mulatto children to the movement? Peace, Chappelle. Thank you, love. I just, threw something together. Astrid jumped to her feet and said, Nathan, you know me. Don't let her speak to me that way. I don't deserve it. I looked Nathan in the eye with the full power of black woman spirituality and said, Nathan knows what's good for him and it's definitely not you. I'll see you tonight, Nathan, and walked away. Astrid left her book on the table, grabbed her knapsack, and ran out as though somebody might chase her. I headed back toward Mona. Mona had a disgusted, pissed off look. So, what did you do? Don't tell me. You went over there and beat up on that stupid little white girl when it should have been his black ass you was kicking. No, Mona. Them white girls always trying to take our men. As soon as they smell a little success headed their brother's way, they over there with their white legs wide open and ready to cash in. Yeah, Mona replied. They couldn't do none of that shit if brothers weren't willing. Besides, what's the difference between that white girl with legs wide open and somebody like Tarsha with her legs wide open? I looked at Mona sternly. She was brilliant in all that mathematic and scientific shit, but she clearly had no interest in and no knowledge of the history of African people in this country and in understanding what were the factors and influences that produced the mentality of most of our people. I leaned toward Mona and said, the difference is cause and effect. The white girl represents the people who throughout history have caused the destruction of the African culture, the African family, and the African value system. Tarsha, on the other hand, represents what happens to African people, specifically women, after they have been destroyed year by the conditions that were created and caused by whites and their government and their educational system. Now, let me pause for a second. Is that true? Like, we know systematic racism, oppression, capitalism, all of that is a white, right, supremacist, which is not supreme at all, structure. But do we look at every white person as that, or as a threat, or as someone that is coming in to steal our men? And or are there just genuinely good white people out there that try to see past race and do good? And what's your thoughts on that? Mona rolled her eyes, gulped down her last bit of coffee, and said, 3 cups. That should keep me up for the rest of the night. Come on, I got work to do. We grabbed our stuff. As we left, looking out the corner of my eye, I could see that Russell had joined Nathan in the corner. Back in our room, Mona went straight to her desk, clicked on her light, and began studying. I undressed myself, thinking deeply about what had happened tonight, and asked myself, who was Nathan that he had so successfully intrigued me? Who was this man I was not initially attracted to, but was now mentally entrapped by? Why did he occupy so much of my thoughts? One thing I was sure. He was brilliant, and I never met anybody like him. I'm telling you, a sapiosexual boy, you get that knowledge, get to thinking, that'll turn you on. Cause I can't deal with no man that don't have no conversation, ain't talking about nothing. I really can't. He was brilliant. I never met anybody like him. The endless knowledge that flowed from his deep mind had seduced me, and I was addicted. Every conversation was like a new adventure. This was new for me. No boredom, no repetition, and a feeling far more powerful than simple sexual attraction. I fell asleep to the music and these thoughts. I was awakened by the sound of whispers. My digital clock said it was 3:30 in the morning. I looked toward Mona's desk, books out as usual. Her bed was empty. I sat up and saw Mona standing, talking softly through a semi-cracked open door with the chain lock still in. Why don't you just leave her alone? I told you she's sleeping. Do you really expect her to take you seriously? I just want to talk to her for a few minutes. Are you the police? Just tell her I'm here and let her decide for herself. Oh my God, it was Nathan, I said. Oh my God, it was Nathan. I said, Mona. She turned around. Sorry he woke you up. I tried to tell him that you were already sleeping and to come back in the morning. It's all right. I pulled back my covers, put on my slippers, and headed toward the door. Mona looked at me as if to say, I know you're not going anywhere with that see-through nightgown on and no goddamn bra. I put on my robe. I unchained the door, stepped outside into the dimly lit dormitory hall, closing the door behind me. I folded my arms in front of me. Yes, Nathan, I said with a firm sensuality. His big brown eyes filled with both a physical and spiritual glow. Then he said, man, I'm into you. No more fronting. I can't deny it. Your brain got me going, but it's scary. You're too powerful. I've never seen anything like it before. You got me going. You have my attention. Even when you don't see me, you have my attention. Your spirit is so strong, it's like an invasion. Nathan's words came gushing out like they had been held too long in a high compression tank. He had begun by looking into my eyes, but now his eyes bounced around, hoping to land somewhere where they did not have to connect with mine. I suddenly realized that as aggressive, talkative, and knowledgeable as Nathan was, there was also something shy in him. He was physically dominant and in every other way as well, but he seemed to lose cool points in my presence. Nathan, I know that you can feel that I want you, but I want you on my terms. I'm serious almost always, and I don't want to play games. I was searching for the words that would allow Nathan to feel my sensuality, but my desire, but also my strength. I wanted to possess him, but I also wanted him to know that this female was also fragile and didn't want to be hurt. I told him he should know that I'm in it for keeps, not for a night or a couple of weeks. Yes, I'm going to start saying I'm in it for keeps, not for a couple of nights or a couple of weeks. He smiled and said, "Don't you think I know that? That's why I've been running for weeks. But I realized there's only one way to deal with a woman like you. But I didn't know there were any women like you, so you caught me off guard. That's something that almost never happens. Listen, I can't stay. I gotta go. I just wanted you to know that I'm here." With my nipples hard, fighting a pop through my robe, I said goodnight. Mona was at her desk still studying. I took off my robe and lay back down in bed, heated and surprised with desire. The next morning, I sprang up with new energy. I saw Mona fast asleep, overworked and exhausted, laying in her bed with her clothes still on. I took her shoes off and placed them under the bed. I put her legs back on top of the bed so they wouldn't cramp up. I jumped in the shower, got dressed, and went to a regularly held meeting of the African Student Organization in which I had become active. This was the group on campus that had undertaken to represent the interests of all African students. Since we were at a largely white university, we of course had many so-called interests. For instance, we had to fight with the university administrators to get the right to control the student fees of all Black and Latino students on campus. The administrators claimed that separating student fees into racial categories was a form of reverse discrimination. They were dumbfounded, however, when we presented documentation and evidence showing that the structures and committees that were supposed to represent all students on campus had only invited white guest lecturers, presented white rock bands, held white beauty pageants, and sponsored events that centered around white European American culture. We argued that we were entitled to control our own monies and activities, both on the principle of self-rule and because of any of the aspirations or needs of the Black and Latino students. Oh, so my connection went out. Even in the few instances where these committees attempted to include African culture, they failed because aside from not actually being Black themselves, they had been educated by a school system whose racist architects had refused to include a curriculum that sought to explore and understand people of color who, after all, represented 7/8 of the world population. We also had to fight to keep the few Black professors that we had. The few Black courses and the comparatively low number of entertaining Black and Latino students made our goals difficult to attain and once met difficult to keep. Despite the myth in white America that said Black students were underqualified and incompetent, the majority of Black students in universities across America had to work 4 times as hard, struggle for goods, services, and education than their white counterparts, for whom these precious things were assumed to be automatically guaranteed and available. Moreover, Black students had to preoccupy themselves with fighting off racial attacks while still having to compete academically on the same level as everyone else in the classroom. Most white students never had to endure or overcome similar difficulties or obstacles. The pressures on Black students were unrelenting. Within the African Student Organization, among ourselves, we faced major challenges. We had to rule out self-pity and learn to combat the contradictions our environment created in most Black people that caused us to hate ourselves and to be envious of each other and disunited. We had to learn to be responsible for ourselves, even though we were groomed in a society that fostered dependency in our community. We had to eliminate laziness and apathy. We had most of all to discover a way to turn our anger and sometimes even our hatred into something constructive and not destructive for our own people. None of this was easy. Meanwhile, my classes were going fine and I could feel myself advancing with every lesson. I was learning the history of America from an African perspective in my black classes and the history of America from a European perspective in my white classes. Of course, like every black student, I had many more white courses than black ones. Nevertheless, I was learning the international nature of our problems as a race and was feeling a stronger and stronger bond with my people, whether they were born in the Caribbean, the African continent itself, or the Americas. And like most students, black or white, I was stumbling through the courses that I had but needed to take anyway. Later that night, after my classes and meetings were finished, I went to unwind in the graduate student lounge. This was a place that was quiet and comfortable with couches, lazy boys, and study tables. Freshmen were not supposed to use it, but security was relaxed and the environment was inviting. I sat down in the comfortable lazy boy and laid my head back, trying to slow down the thoughts which began racing the second I opened my eyes each morning. Soon I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Russell, Nathan's friend. "Hey, Russell, what's up?" "Chilling," he responded. "I'm trying to finish this paper for my quantitative methods course." "Good luck," I said, baffled by the course title. "I can't believe I'm graduating, but thank God it's finally over." "Well, Russell, congratulations. I can't say that I can really relate since I just got here, but I'm finishing my freshman year here, and believe me, I've been through a lot." "Yeah, but I've watched you, and you've grown a lot. Don't let anybody fool you. You came in strong, real strong. In fact, I know women in the senior class who are nowhere near your level. It's a shame when you really think about it." "What is?" "How can a brother marry any of these silly women we see around here? In 5 minutes they'll have a degree, but they still won't have any common sense. Then the same women will turn around and call a brother irresponsible for not being able to make a commitment. But how can a brother make a commitment to an empty-headed, materialistic, self-centered college girl?" "Funny thing," I said, "brothers and sisters have so many negative things to say about one another. It seems like we have to find some common ground somewhere, a place where we can start building." "True," Russell said, "but in order to start building, there has to be a foundation. How do you give a woman who has already lived 20 years of her life in a state of total confusion and valueless chaos a new foundation? How do you teach a woman that a brother's car, job, and wallet are less important than his integrity, direction, values, character, and family?" I watched Russell as he talked. He was a serious guy, a practicing Christian, brown skin with jet black curly hair. He was considered handsome enough to have his choice of women, but he was finicky. Now he stood before me, pouring his heart out about the poor selection of women in a university where there were 4 times as many black women as black men. Was he just talking, or was there a specific reason he was telling me all of this? So I tested him. "I think we all have weaknesses, but I'm willing to overlook some of them and work on the ones that can be corrected. That's why I admire Nathan." Sure enough, his face soured at the mention of his friend's name. "Nathan," I went on, "has taught me a lot, and I appreciate it so much. It's really the first time any brother has taken the time to show and explain things I never knew. I think if we could ever really get together, we'd make a hell of a team." Russell said flatly, "Yeah, Nathan's interesting. I say he's more of a contradiction than anything else. It's like I said about the foundation. It's hard to start building one at 23 years old." I heard Russell, but I wasn't really listening. I was completely taken with Nathan, and as far as foundations went, from what I recently learned, Islam seemed a stronger foundation as Christianity. Plus, Nathan had a certain charisma that Russell lacked. Russell cut the conversation short and exited with the words, "Everybody has to learn for themselves." I interrupted by saying, "Yeah, but everybody can be helped." Russell didn't let my comment go. He said, "But they have to want to be helped. Anyhow, I'm in room 202. You probably didn't know that. Come by and talk with me sometime. That is, if you need to talk." A week passed by and no sign of Nathan. I thought to myself, "Oh, he's still running?" I stopped by his room and knocked on his door, but he wasn't in. Then I did something intrusive. I read the mini bulletin board on his door. His friend Rich was telling him about a party happening in apartment 2F at the campus of the agriculture school about 15 minutes away by bus. This was before cell phones and stuff, y'all, so you had to leave notes and stuff if you popped up on somebody. His friend Rich was telling him about a party happening in apartment 2F at the campus of the agriculture school about 15 minutes away by bus. I jotted down the information on a sheet of paper and ran upstairs to plan what I was going to wear to the party I was about to crash. I rang apartment 2F's doorbell confidently. I was crystal clear that I risked getting dissed. A brother opened the door and welcomed me in. The place was back to back and belly to belly. The sweat was pouring off the walls. Inside, there were several rooms. One was for those who were strictly there to dance to the music. One room was for the so-called intellectuals to sit around sipping drinks and talking. Another room was set aside for people who were doing anything that that should not be publicly displayed. I slipped my way into the coat room, which was simply a bed piled high with coats, and relieved myself of my coat. I then began looking for Nathan. I walked around slowly, having a laugh at myself as I realized that it would be damn near impossible to see him in the dark. But to my surprise, in the corner was Nathan, completely defying the organization of the party as he, two brothers, and one sister stood close together talking in the room where everybody else was dancing. I decided I would slide over by the corner, start dancing, and pretend it was a complete coincidence if Nathan happened to see me there. I started dancing by myself. Within seconds, a brother came out of nowhere and started dancing with me. If I had calculated things correctly, Nathan would now be standing directly behind where I was dancing with his back toward me. So as the music played and drum machines ripped, I maneuvered my dancing, playing off of the full house, and accidentally backed right into Nathan. He turned around to do a simple check and turned back around to his conversation. It must have taken him a minute to process what had just happened, because that's how long it took him to turn back around, place his hand on my shoulder, and spin me around saying, "What are you doing here?" Squinting my eyes as if I couldn't see him, I said, "Excuse me," and jerked my shoulder back. Nathan, perhaps believing I could not recognize him in the dark and sweaty room, said, "It's me, Nate." I then plastered a smile on my face and said, "What, can I party like everybody else?" Nathan said, "Yeah, it just bugged me out to see you here. Most freshmen aren't up on the spot." "Well," I said, "I know a lot of people. You'd be surprised. Besides, I told you before, I go where the music goes. Are you dancing or just talking tonight?" I knew I had to become more aggressive on a sexual level, otherwise my relationship with Nathan might never happen on more than a mental and spiritual plane. Just as Nathan opened his mouth to answer my question, the sister he had been talking with in the corner when I first came in tapped him and said, "Nathan, here's your drink." Nathan held his hand up as if it were a stop sign, and said, "Come on now, you know I don't drink." The girl stared hard at Nathan. She said nothing and simply walked away with the drink in her hand. "Who's that?" I asked. "Oh, nobody. She's just a friend of Rich's. I don't really know her at all." "That's good." I took the opportunity to use the atmosphere to my advantage. I moved closer to Nathan and pressed my breast against his belly and placed my hand on his waist. "Damn, it's crowded in here." I knew he felt the warmth of my body and I felt the warmth and security of his. I looked into his eyes and motioned for him to bring his head down toward my lips. "I need to talk with you. No games, no running, alone." I slid my hand from his ear gently down over his sculptured face. Now both my hands were on his waist. "No problem," he said. "We'll meet tomorrow. You know where to find me." I was disappointed, for no real reason except that I felt it was more of the same catch me if you can. He was definitely a ladies' man. Everywhere I saw him, there seemed to be at least two women trying to attach themselves to him, but I sensed that he was looking for more than an attachment. Those girls were easy. I wasn't, and I could see that anything that came hard to Nathan was scary to him, because he was used to commanding every stage and getting what he wanted through his charm, without ever having to ask outright. I think I'm going to stop right there. Like 10 more pages left. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 9 pages left. I already read most of it. Should I keep going or should I stop? It's 2 of y'all on here. What should I do? I'm going to let y'all decide. I'm on page 77. It ends on page 96. So that's about 9 pages. Should I keep going or not? Keep going? You have been tuned in a while. I'll keep going for you because you asked. And I'm interested in this book. Okay. So Nathan, the challenge was scary to him because he was used to commanding every stage and getting what he wanted through his charm without ever having to ask outright. The next day, reality kicked in and I had to crash a paper I had neglected to write. This made it impossible for me to go mess around with Nathan. When I got back from the computer room where I was typing up my final draft, I found a note under my door from him. It said, "Even when you don't see me, I'm there." I smiled. Excuse me. I smiled and decided Nathan was into the drama of the chase. Was into the drama of the chase and was probably going to turn me out if we ever did hit those sheets. With any luck, It would be as hot and perfect as my own fantasies. Later that night, I planned to pay him a visit. Maybe I would lock him in his own room and jump right on top of him, or maybe I would just stop by and he would have special plans for me. There was a knock at my door. When I opened it, there stood the white girl who lived in the room next door. I looked at her inquisitively, and she responded to my look by saying, "Telephone." I went out into the hallway to pick up the payphone, which was the only way to reach people in the freshman dorm. It was my mother's voice on the other end of the line. She was calling to tell me that my sister was pregnant. My mouth fell open as I tried to imagine any man laying on top of my 13-year-old baby sister. I thought of how naive and fragile and young she seemed to me, and I thought of how sexually unaware I was at her age. "I'm going to take her to get an abortion on Friday morning," my mother said. "No, Mommy, I don't believe in that. It's wrong. If she doesn't get this abortion, her whole life will be ruined. She's too young to have a baby." "Yes, Mommy, I understand all that, but she has you, 2 older sisters, and an older brother. We can all help take care of the baby." "Look," my mother responded, short of patience and annoyed, "I'm not taking care of nobody's baby. I have no time for this foolishness. I just called to let you know your sister will probably be upset after the procedure, so maybe you can come home for the weekend or just give her a call or something." "Mommy, does she want to get an abortion?" "No, she doesn't, but she's too young to make an intelligent decision." "Is she there? Can I speak to her?" "No, she's not here, and I don't even know where she's at. I'll tell her to call you when she gets home tonight. Listen, I have to go. I don't need you to run up my phone bill. See ya. Take care." My heart was bursting. My sister and I had always been so close, and never did she mention anything about being sexually involved with boys. I felt mixed emotions. One of them was guilt. Had I left my sister at a young age unprepared and thus unable to make proper decisions? The other emotion was anger. I felt that my mother had not properly supervised her. She didn't even mention who the baby's father was, but knowing my mother, that was completely irrelevant anyway. Moreover, she didn't even know where my sister was most of the time. It's precisely that casual attitude between mothers and daughters that leads to young girls looking for real love and attention in all the wrong and premature places. Say that, sis. So since I had been away at school for the past 8 months, my baby sister had found a new best friend. Only this time it was a man, and their relationship was sexual, not sisterly. Spiritually, I felt decisions to abort were made too quickly with the disgusting ease of conscience. Abortion had become so normal in the black community that it was like pissing or shitting or something. No real thought went into the decision. There was no remorse or hesitation. Worse, there was no worry over what I had come to think of as the spiritual tax, the cost your spirit and soul had to pay on Judgment Day for the reckless and arbitrary destruction of life. I sat through my American history course in a daze, half listening to the professor explain the institution of slavery and how historically it had been over-dramatized and oversold by black people and so-called academians. Too much, he said, had been made over the rape of slave women and the sale of slave babies, when in fact, he insisted, most of the slaves, their masters, and their masters' family had been a tightly knit unit woven together by love and mutual need. No, the hell it wasn't. He went on to say that most of the plantations in the South were not big with tens and hundreds of slaves and animals, but were in fact small farms owned by white families who had somewhere between 1 and 5 slaves. Within these relationships, he claimed, love had developed along with a mutual dependency. As evidence, he cited the fact that black women had actually breastfed most of their owners' white children themselves, so naturally there was an intimate, even a maternal bond between the mammy and the little white children they lovingly cared for. Now, I usually would have spoken out and protested such claptrap, but my thoughts of my little sister became intertwined with the professor's obscene lessons, and I felt vomit brewing in the pit of my stomach. With a reputation as deep and critical thinker, the professor also taught a course on the Holocaust. How could he not understand that there was no love, that there can be no love in a master-slave relationship? Such a relationship, it seemed obvious to me, was based solely on power. The power of the white world and its control of food, land, resources, police dogs, prisons, and lynching ropes over the life of the powerless black slave victim. The slave had only 2 choices, either to submit and pretend to be a genteel figment of his master's imagination, serving him with the appearance of happy cooperation, or to fight back and have the flesh torn from his body until both his spirit and body were broken. Or perhaps he might plot the destruction of his master, only to be betrayed by some other slave unwilling to risk the consequences of rebellion, and then hung from a rope to be plucked and to be picked and plucked by vultures? Was my professor so steeped in the insidious ideology of white supremacy that he had somehow convinced himself that black women had suckled the children of their white masters voluntarily? Had he actually believed that African women preferred suckling these foreign children over suckling their own children who were left unattended and oftentimes hungry? Did he really believe that both love and lust were elements in a master-slave sexual relationship, which in reality had amounted to a rape that had become so routine its victim had to either make it a normal function of life or lose her own life and mine, or both? And most of all, I raged, if slavery had been over dramatized and oversold, why then have millions of African people found it so hard to re-knit their lives, psyche, and families back together again? A hardship as exemplified by my own fatherless shell of a family where my own African mother had become so petrified of the constraints of life that murder of the unborn was an easy call. I packed up my books and walked out. That night I knocked on Nathan's door. I was depressed, but sensed that Nathan would understand, as he had a great understanding of many things. He opened the door with the usual warm smile. I closed the door behind me and put the chain lock on. Hold on. Inside Nathan's room was cleanliness, healthiness, a careful arrangement of dim lights and candles, incense and jazz. His smile widened and he said, "So, the lion has come to the end of her?" I interrupted. "I came to talk." I told Nathan the story of my 13-year-old baby sister and my sentiments about abortion. He agreed with me and said that even though people tried to convince themselves that the seed was not a life, by spiritual law it was a life at the moment of conception, a life that, according to Nathan, Allah had already written the scroll for. He told me that he believed so strongly in the Creator that he feared the consequences of any evil doing. He admitted that most people were so ignorant and foolish that they didn't realize that there was consequences to our every action. He told me that I should calm down and relax a little, because a person with 4 sisters like myself could testify to the fact that there would be so many more things that would be done by my family members that would be completely out of my control. He confided that his father, a former church deacon, was an alcoholic. He said that he went home from college during breaks. He would often encounter seated around the He confided that his father, a former church deacon, was an alcoholic. He said that when he went home from college during breaks, he would often encounter seated around the television in the living room his drunk father and 4 sisters, all of whom had either reefer, cocaine, or heroin in their systems. Tears welled up in his eyes but did not fall, but they fell from mine. "Have you ever tried peppermint or coconut soap?" Nathan asked. I hadn't. He went into his closet and pulled out a robe and the soap and pointed me toward the shower, saying it would help me relax. I went slowly. While in the shower, many thoughts raced through my head. Was this a setup? But wasn't this what I wanted anyway? Did Nathan care about me, or was this simply his procedure with women? As the water flowed down my face and the steam cleansed my pores, I decided to relax and explore and allow nature to take its course. I came out of the shower smelling like the Caribbean. "Lay down," he instructed. "You can stay here tonight. I'll keep you company." I slipped under the covers and laid my head on the pillow. Nathan sat down by my side and said, "Have you ever read Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison and Native Son by Richard Wright?" I hadn't. Ellison and Wright, he said, were powerful authors. They dealt with the question of black manhood, African manhood, and what it meant. You know, it's very difficult to be a man when you're black in America. Very few of us really know how. Most of us fake it, and we do a good job because our women are so confused that they're not hard to fool. He turned toward me and said, "Sometimes I feel like the Invisible Man, and sometimes I feel like Bigger Thomas," which is a character in the Invisible Man if you haven't read it. The big black killer in Native Son. Oh, sorry. I got that wrong. Native Son. Bigger Thomas is a Native Son. Sometimes I feel like the Invisible Man, and sometimes I feel like Bigger Thomas, the big black killer in Native Son. Then, smiling, he said, "There's something special about you, girl. Something spiritual and uncorrupted. Something pure. That's why I ran from you, because I know you are directly from God, and I don't want to hurt you." Nathan turned off the lights, and only the flame from the candle he had lit flickered in the darkness. As he undid his clothes, I noticed for the first time what I believed a real man looked like. His body was tight and defined, every muscle, every ligament, not an ounce of fat. His legs were runner legs, long, black, tight, and sleek. He got under the covers, and I put my hand on his stomach and moved it softly to his chest, saying to myself, "So, this is what a real man feels like. Hard and muscular, not soft and flabby like Chuck." My fingers moved in and out of his many grooves, inclinations, and declines. I was young and fascinated. Nathan turned to his side and kissed me with his thick African lips. For the first time, I felt secure, my body bursting with pleasure as his lips offered me a comfort, warmth, and power I had never known. My body surrendered as Nathan took charge. He was the navigator of a willing ship in a tumultuous and inviting sea. I whispered in his ear, "Be gentle. This is a first for me." A half-truth, and he entered into my body the stiffest, hardest, fullest, and most welcome flesh I had ever known. I woke up the next morning to shades wide open and the celebrating springtime sun beaming, a clean, fresh-smelling room and an empty bed. Nathan was gone. I panicked and wondered whether I was officially a stunt that had been tricked by an upperclassman, but to my relief, a brief frenzy led me to a note that Nathan had left on top of his desk. It said, "Peace, you're deep and natural. Don't worry, you'll get yours in a box." Oh, what, a ring? What are you talking about? Hold on, I woke up the next morning and asked whether I had been tricked by an upperclassman. He left a note. He said, "Peace, you are deep and natural. Don't worry, you'll get yours in a box." I smiled, trying to decipher his cryptic message. I quickly concluded that he felt I was special and that feeling would one day lead him to offer me an engagement ring because rings came in a box. The note allowed me to feel that he still respected me because marriage was a topic hardly ever introduced by a black man voluntarily, at least not in my world. I ain't never had black men voluntarily talk to me about marriage or engagement, never been proposed to. So, yeah. Nathan graduated. Let me take that back. People have asked to marry me, but they're in Jamaica and they met me online and they was obsessed with me and loved me, and I've never met them and it was creepy. That don't really count to me. Nathan graduated. Mona and I completed our freshman year. My sister survived, and Nathan and I had come together. He was my man, and I was his woman. I wondered what would happen to us now that he was officially out of school and I had to return in September. But I was so happy and in love that I decided to cross that bridge when I got to it. My body was adjusting to making love on a regular basis as it now became more of an overwhelming desire, certain to receive regular fulfillment. Needless to say, being involved with Nathan had me 3 to 5 minutes more advanced than the average freshman going on to be a sophomore. With Nathan's encouragement, I read many more books in my free time than books that had been assigned reading by my professors. I went to museums, concerts, bookstores, libraries, get-togethers, lectures. Let me make a point about that. So it is important to get out and experience life, to meet new people, to go to different places you might not would go, to learn new things, learn about other people's cultures, learn about your own culture as an African melanated person of the diaspora, and these different places will help you learn that. Museums and concerts and bookstores and libraries and lectures and get-togethers and meetups and sister circles and all that jazz. We went to parks and on walks, and Nathan took me shopping, explaining to me the difference between low quality and high quality shoes and materials. We compared notes on our family trials and tribulations, and he even had me, a Christian girl, participate in the Muslim holy fast called Ramadan. My whole diet changed to a completely healthy menu. My weight balanced out, and for the first time in my life, I maintained a fine figure. Under the challenge of a dare, I had quit eating red meat for good. Since the day after graduation, Nathan had been looking for a job. As May turned into June and June turned into July, Nathan became cranky and short on patience. He had expected simply to graduate and be rewarded for his degree, his intelligence, and his discipline. He had believed that the college degree would free him from poverty. Despite his deep understanding of racism, he believed that the degree would at least grant him tolerance from white people and some sort of economic integration and inclusion. He'd come home from his job search and interviews amazed that, despite a double major in history and political science, people were asking him, rather amazingly, if he could type, play football, coach a team, or drive a truck. We began to discuss the prospect of starting his own business. I told him he was very talented and that together we could find a way to turn some of his skills into a profitable little startup business. He confessed that despite his college education, he had absolutely no idea how to start his own business. Meanwhile, I had found work as a part-time intern in a law firm. I would find out what the legal requirements were for starting a business. 2 days later, After talking to my boss, a black male attorney who specialized in criminal law and had traveled throughout the world and served in many offices, I had a small understanding of what was necessary. I arrived at Nathan's house with a certificate of incorporation form and a short pamphlet about tax rules and regulations for forming a corporation. Nathan said my enthusiasm always amazed him. Oddly, he didn't seem enthusiastic at all. He seemed distraught, discouraged, and depressed. Careful not to be too pushy, I briefly explained that we could get our friends together to be small investors once we agreed on what type of business we wanted to have, what type of services we could offer that people would be willing to purchase. I told him to take his time, and when he finished thinking, we could share our conclusions. By late August, Nathan still had not been hired anywhere, and when we were together, he seemed aloof. He resisted the conversation about moving forward with the business plan because he didn't seem to believe in it. He didn't believe it was feasible or that it could be successful enough to pay his bills. School was set to start for me, and the African Student Organization was off to an early start, planning and organizing events for incoming Black and Latino freshmen. The plan was to get them so involved that they would enjoy college enough to work hard and stay enrolled. Some white universities on their own had always failed to achieve. I asked the organization if we could sponsor a speaker for the orientation. I suggested Nathan, and he was a positive example because he was a former student. He had graduated, and that was what we were encouraging. He was politically aware and had a degree which qualified him to render both a political and historical analysis. The argument was hard to sell since he was also my man, but my persistence won, and they were willing to offer Nathan $500 as an honorarium for delivering a lecture and holding a workshop. That night, I told Nathan about the offer, and I said that I saw this as the beginning of his lecture career, something which could prove to be quite profitable. He gave me a half smile and dismissed my help as charity. I argued that it could only be considered charity if he was actually not qualified to do what was being offered, but that I had simply used some contacts to get his qualified foot in the door. After all, this was how people made business deals all the time. I was excited about returning to school, and the first week of classes resumed. I was officially a sophomore. I looked at going back to college as presenting me with even greater opportunities to learn. Of course, I would miss Nathan's everyday presence, but as he was my man, I knew we'd talk every day on the phone and get together on weekends. I spent my week organizing myself and getting my room ready. This year, I had what was called a single, which simply meant a dormitory room for one person. I got it to ensure privacy for me and Nathan. I planned my academic schedule so I could have Fridays off, giving me 3 precious days a week with Nathan. Friday afternoon, I got to Nathan's house a little earlier than expected, and he had a guest. He seemed so upbeat from his usual unemployed funk that I knew this must be somebody important. He introduced the brother to me as David, and that he was his old running partner, his man, his partner in crime, the brother who had taught me everything I know today. I was impressed with anybody who could claim credit for Nathan's brilliant mind, so I smiled brightly and said, "What's up? Nice to meet you." David was dark like Nathan, just a bit shorter, and seemed about 5 or 6 years older. He grabbed my hand and kissed it. He smiled, revealing a beautiful set of white teeth just like Nathan's. He said, "You're even finer than Nathan said." He turned toward Nathan and said, "Yo, she's beautiful." David seemed even more polished and smoother than Nathan, but that was to be expected since he was, after all, Nathan's teacher. Nathan signaled me to come into the kitchen. There, Nate said to me quietly, "Baby, do you mind if we change our date until tomorrow night? I haven't seen Dave in over a year, and he's telling me about a job he has lined up for me at an investment firm." The name of the firm sounded important and prestigious. I was so happy I was through the roof, not because I was particular about an investment firm, but because Dave was so clearly lifted Nathan's spirit, and I knew it would be easier for a man to help another man with a job than for his woman to help him. I personally didn't care who helped Nathan, as long as he was relieved of the tremendous pressure he had been under. It was this pressure that was destroying his attitude and taxing our relationship. I gave Nathan a kiss and a warm hug and said, "I'll see you tomorrow then, baby. Good luck." Tomorrow came, but Nathan never did. I ended up sleeping on the couch in his living room all night Saturday. I woke up about 4:30 Sunday morning and no Nate. My whole body was tense and my neck was stiff. I was worried that something terrible might have happened to him. By 11 o'clock, I was receiving glances from Nathan's mother that clearly indicated I had overstayed my welcome, at least in Nathan's absence. She, too, I thought, was anxious over her son's whereabouts. I packed up my little bag and left to get on the train to go back to school. I did not hear from Nathan for the rest of the day. I assumed that he had not come home yet, and it took all of my discipline to keep from calling his house. At 11 that night, I broke down and called. Nathan's mother answered with exasperation. Still no Nate. Monday, I had classes back to back all day. At the end of the day, I skipped dinner and went straight to my room to wait for the call I kept hoping to receive. I sat there stiff. I held in my peace, scared that if I went to the bathroom, I wouldn't hear the phone ring. Still nothing but silence. Tuesday night, I packed up my overnight bag and got on the train to Nathan's. By this time, I felt someone was playing a game with me. I arrived at about 9:30 p.m. When I rang the bell, Nathan's sister answered. Instead of inviting me in, she stood there as if she was uncertain about what I wanted. She knew what I wanted. I wanted Nathan. Is Nathan home? I asked, hanging on the end of my rope. Yes, he just got back, but he's upstairs saying his prayers right now and does not want to be disturbed. Resenting the fact that she was not treating me like I had been at their house every day for the past 3.5 months, I was overcome with tears. I pushed her aside and ran through the door up the stairs to Nathan's room. I flung his bedroom door open, and there he was, incense burning and bent over in prayer, facing the east. Embarrassed, ashamed, and confused, I quickly closed the door so I wouldn't disturb him any further. But this time his sister was at the top of the steps looking like she wanted to kick my ass, and she sarcastically spit out, "I told you so. Now can you wait downstairs in the living room?" It was more of an order than a question, so I went straight down. Nathan finally came downstairs to the living room where I was nervously patting my foot on the floor. His head was down and his eyes were lowered. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Something told me not to touch him, so I didn't. I decided that instead of blurring out, "Where the fuck have you been?" I would be cool and wait for him to explain. There was silence. Finally, I said, "What's up, Nate? Are you okay?" He said flatly, "I'm fine." He didn't look up. I want to do some reading tonight in my holy Quran, so could you do me a favor? Could you please leave? The request was abrupt but not hateful. I knew something was wrong, but he looked too far gone for me to reach him at that moment. I picked up my bag and said, "Nate, I'll leave, but please let me know whatever the problem is. We're supposed to be partners, not you on the inside and me on the outside." Nathan said, "Yeah, I'll call you." At around 10 p.m. on Wednesday, the next day, I was sitting at my desk doing my homework. The phone rang. It was Nathan. "Hi," I said softly. "I miss you. When can I see you?" Nate replied solemnly, "You can't. I decided it's best if we don't see each other. I'm asking you not to come, not to call, not to do anything." I tried to speak, but my voice had packed up and left. "I know you want to be friends, but we can't be friends either. We just need to eliminate all communication." "Why?" I squeaked. "It's not you. You're beautiful. I even say you're as perfect as any man could ask for. I began to cry repeatedly, softly. "Why?" "Because it's the way it has to be. I'm no good for you." Then I became angry and hysterical, and my voice jumped out all over the place. "Whose decision is that? Whose decision is it as to whether or not you are good for me or not?" He probably went and had sex with a white girl that week he was gone while she was there. "You'll be all right in a few days. You're a strong woman." "Ooh! What?" "You'll be all right in a few days. You're a strong woman," he said as if I was sitting there in a blue suit with a big red S on my chest. "I didn't date you to be all right. I was all right when you met me. I dated you because you completed me and because you complimented me and I complimented you. So stop saying that dumb shit, 'You'll be all right.' That's not the goddamn point." Then he said, "Take care." And I heard the click as he hung up on me. I called back 4 times and got the busy signal. I dialed again and his mother answered and coldly announced, "He's not here." I jumped on the train and went to his house. His sister just opened up the upstairs window and shouted, "He's not here." 2 weeks passed. Nathan's family grew tired and angry over my repeated calls and impromptu visits, so I looked up the address for the investment firm he was applying to and headed to Wall Street. When I got there, the receptionist confirmed that he was employed there, but in order to get upstairs, I would need a pass. The receptionist called him on the phone and then told me that my pass was denied. I decided to wait outside until 5 p.m., figuring that we would see each other when he got off work. But he knew my ways and didn't come out. He wouldn't accept my calls or my visits. He wouldn't accept me. I buried myself in 3 times my usual amount of schoolwork. When anybody asked about Nathan, I responded with silence. Not because it angered me, but because the whole thing was too painful. It was hard enough to think about, but to discuss it would have destroyed me. 70 days, 70 prayers, and 25 pounds lost later at 70 days, 70 prayers, and 25 pounds lost later at 7 p.m., I received a call. It was hard to hear the voice clearly because there was so much noise in the background. "I need you. Please come. I need you." "Nate? Nate, is that you?" The background music and chatter was so loud I wasn't sure if it was him or if I was bugging out completely. "I'm at Charlie's on Wall Street. Please come now. I'll wait." Click. 2 hours later, I walked through a crowded bar filled with men and women dressed in business style suits, trench coats, laughing, drinking, and smoking. A ton of smoke filled the air. Allergic to cigarettes and disgusted by the smell of them, I was anxious to find Nate fast. I found him bellying up to the bar, ordering another rum and coke, please. I looked at him. He had obviously been drinking for at least several hours. I sat in the stool next to him as my respect for him began to plunge at an accelerating rate. Nathan smiled and said, I can't believe you came. You look so beautiful. He leaned over to kiss me, missed, and fell. I was shocked. I leaned over to help him up, and he said, that's okay. I can get up myself. He lifted himself up and moved toward me to give me a hug. I recoiled. You smell disgusting. You know I hate the smell of alcohol. He said, please don't. Stumbling into a nearby booth and asked me to sit with him. Baffled by his fall from grace, I sat down wanting to know what had happened to my strong Muslim man. Nate, what's going on? I got the job. Well, I can see that. What else is going on? I'm down here with all these dressed up perverts. They like to play with little boys and go home and say, hey, honey, how's the kid? He started laughing. Why did you leave me, Nate? I don't understand this. We were strong when we were together. Not like you are now. Where did you go that weekend? His laugh was a harsh and bitter bark. I was with my lover, David. What? Hold on, y'all. I was with my lover, David. He helped me get this way, you know. I tried to fight it. I tried to fight the demons, but no matter what I did and how hard I tried, the demons kept coming back and coming back. The blood seemed to empty from my body and spill all over the floor. I sat lifeless for what seemed an eternity. Old scenes of love, prayer, respect, education, and mutual history flashed and raced through my brain. I lost all sense of desire for Nate. There was no longer any relationship to fix, at least not as far as I was concerned. It was just one human being helping a dirty, drunk, and confused human being out of a bar before some tragedy like robbery or murder came upon him. I helped Nate up, walked slowly through the streets of New York with him to a train station. I paid his and my train fare and took him back to my room. I laid him on my bed where he fell fast asleep. I took off his shoes, coat, and opened his necktie and the first few buttons on his shirt. I grabbed the chair from under my desk and sat in it where I slept until morning. When I awoke, I gave Nate a bowl of hot water, a washcloth, and 2 aspirins. My face was blank and my actions merely functional. I sat back down in my chair and waited. The room was filled with silence and shame. So, Nate is gay. No. He spit back in a strong voice I was accustomed to hearing. I never used that term. It's a lie. Do I look happy to you? Was Mona happy? I gasped in more than a mouthful of air and began to cough. He silently, with his eyes confirmed, yes, Mona too. I love women. I love you. I think you're beautiful. But I'm sick. It comes in spurts. I'll be fine for months, and then when the pressure mounts up, it comes back again. The demons start calling me, and I find myself engaging in some perverted activity. What about Islam? I asked. Islam is pure. Islam is perfect. I use it to stay strong, but sometimes I fail. Islam does not fail. I fail. Explain to me how something like this can happen to you, somebody who I look up to. It's racism. Right then I got pissed off. I felt like he was using something I felt strongly about to make excuses for himself to further manipulate me. Please, take responsibility for your own shortcomings. He responded, Black Nate. Nate the Spade. You so black you blue. Who can see you? Yeah, I like women like every other young brother does. But women didn't love me. It was always a joke, a crack, a snap. David was a friend of my older sister. They went some acting classes together. He came by my house for the first time one day with my sister. He looked at me and began to tell me how handsome I was. He has all kind of information about blackness and the beauty of African people. My sister thought it was good that I have a role model. She said I needed a strong man to fill in for my drunken father. So she brought him over to the house after class all the time. Only thing she didn't know was David liked little black boys. So instead of loving women, he didn't seem to love me or have anything decent to say. So instead of loving women who didn't seem to love me or have anything decent to say, I loved David, and the first person to tell me anything positive about myself at a young and impressionable age. By the time women started to admire me and my blackness, my mind was already twisted and I couldn't relate. I was confused and looking for help, but I don't have to tell you how hard it is to get good help in our community. My junior year in high school, one of my teachers took an interest in me for what he said was my brilliance and intelligence. He took me under his wing and he introduced me to Islam. I love Islam because it gave me clarity. I understood what I must do as a man. It gave me a set of guidelines and a purpose, but I had been so corrupted and misled by that time that I agreed with Islam intellectually and spiritually, but had to fight with my perverted emotions and the fact that at a young age I was taught to look at men in a perverted way and women in a negative way. When I met you, you were a change and a challenge. See, I could pretend that my problem was under control by clinging to Islam and not having to deal with women in any real way. The women made that easy. They were empty-headed, misguided, and had no self-respect. To put them all off, all I had to do was keep pointing out their faults so they would never see my faults. I knew they would never be able to catch up to me intellectually. They couldn't even decipher my game, so I didn't have to answer to them. Then you came along. Beautiful, intelligent, aggressive, political, and spiritual. I couldn't find any angles. I was genuinely turned on. I was aroused sexually and in every way. But these feelings were new and I was so confused, so I tried to stay away. Excuse me. But you kept coming and coming, so I turned more and more to Islam. I prayed for strength and direction. I entered a relationship with you out of true love for you, a real attraction, but still knowing that I wasn't the man that you deserved. That's why I left, because you deserve a real man. But in America, it will be hard to find because we've all been so destroyed in one way or another. So I was like an experiment for you? No, I wouldn't say that. My feelings were and still are real. Nothing physical happened when I saw David. Nothing. Just painful memories of incomplete manhood. But the memories haunt me to this day, and it's going to take time for me to get my program stabilized and on track. Believe me, if I didn't love you, I wouldn't be here disgracing myself with the story that I have never told anyone. But I had to tell you because I believe you are of God, a mirror for me to look into. You're a challenge for me to be stronger, but honestly speaking, it will take me years for me to catch up with you. And when I picture myself inside my mind's eye, I see one person, not two. That's because I have to repair myself before I can unite with someone as sure and true as you. So I freed you because I love you. I don't want you to suffer through years of my problems. I sat motionless, trying to digest all Nathan was confessing to me. Yes, I could see that racism has scarred us all one way or another. I could see how we have all had the course and direction of our lives affected and for some rearranged by racism. But I was no longer attracted to Nathan. He now sat before me, a shattered husk of a man. I was concerned about him as a human being. So just as he had set me free, I would set him free, and the pain inside me would soon wither, and perhaps my wisdom would expand. I would continue to fight the racism that rearranges the minds of our people. I would have to if we African women were to save our sons. But Nate, I said, you lied to me. That's the thing that hurts me most. Nate stood up and slowly collected his few things. He looked me in my eye and said, if people lie to God each and every day in their prayers and their promises and in their actions, what make you think they won't lie to you? Ooh, that was good. So the fat man was the real man. Elwood, you bring out a good point. Her chubby man, when she was touching all on Nate and was like, oh, this is what a real man feel like. Wow, look at that. We'll take intellect and physical appearance over not having social cues and the right body. But I had a situation with a guy who, once we were done, I heard tell through the wind, through some lesbians, that he was actually identified as queer or was on the down low, and he may have had some situations with men. And most people that had met him assumed that he was on the down low or like men, and I didn't see it at the time. But looking back, and the stuff he used to talk about black women, very similar to Nate. And I was very attracted to his intellect. And it was like he was hiding behind all these things, all this information that he had, and was quick to call me out about how I look and the physical things I needed to do, and use polygamy as a ploy to, be with different women. And I think he probably had some situations, growing up with some men. And so it's interesting. Like, that's an interesting conversation to have. Like, how many of our black men have been approached by other men or have been shown so much love that they feel like, that's how many of them are battling, trying to really be strong, masculine, and, providing men and secretly desiring other men. So that's a very interesting topic and concept. So I appreciate those of you that tuned in. Thank you, Elwood, for sticking around the longest. I really enjoyed this book. It's really good. It's a really good read, and it touches on a lot of real life topics. So I appreciate y'all. But I'm about to wind down for the night. I will tune in with y'all later. Peace, love, and light. Thanks, Elwood. Appreciate you. Peace.